The sound of knuckles against wood changed everything. 3 gentle taps that rewrote my future when I'd already accepted defeat. If you've ever felt like you were drowning in responsibilities with no one to throw you a lifeline, this story might just be your beacon. Before I continue, if this resonates with you, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps me share more stories of hope when it seems all is lost. I stared at the pile of unpaid bills scattered across the kitchen table, the morning light casting harsh shadows across final notices and past due stamps. My daughter Emma's school photo smiled up at me from beneath an electricity warning, her missing front tooth and messy pigtails a painful reminder of everything I was failing to provide. 6 months as a single dad, and I was drowning. Not the dramatic, flailing kind of drowning you see in movies, but the quiet kind where you're slowly sinking while trying to look like you've got it all figured out. The coffee in my mug had gone cold hours ago. I'd been up since 4 a.m., trying to figure out how to stretch my last paycheck to cover rent, groceries, and Emma's asthma medication. My construction job had cut back hours, and freelance handyman work wasn't filling the gap. Emma was still asleep, her soft snores carrying down the hallway of our small apartment. At least in sleep, she was free from the worry that had become her constant companion at just 8 years old. "Daddy, did you eat breakfast?" she'd ask most mornings, her eyes too knowing for a child her age. She'd started saving parts of her school lunch to bring home to me. My heart broke a little more each time she pulled a squished half sandwich from her backpack, offering it with such earnest concern. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the stubble on my chin that I hadn't had time to shave in days. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, a sound that had become ominous as it grew louder, signaling its impending failure. Another expense I couldn't afford. That's when I heard it. 3 knocks, gentle but deliberate. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at 6:30 a.m. on a Tuesday. Bill collectors didn't come this early, and friends, well, those had gradually disappeared as I'd withdrawn into the overwhelming responsibility of single parenthood after Maria's death. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. I opened the door to find a woman I'd never seen before. She was about my age, maybe mid-30s, with dark curly hair pulled back in a messy bun. She wore scrubs and had the tired eyes of someone who'd just finished a long shift. "James Mercer?" she asked, consulting a small notepad. "Yes?" I replied, immediately defensive. Was she from social services? Had someone reported the nights when our heat was off? The times when dinner was just crackers and peanut butter? "I'm Nora Winters. I live in 3B. She gestured vaguely toward the floor below. "I'm a nurse at County General, and I'm starting a community support program for families in the building. Single parents, specifically." I stood frozen, one hand still on the door, ready to close it. I'd become skilled at rejecting help, at insisting we were fine when we were anything but. "I don't need charity," I said automatically, the words bitter on my tongue. Nora didn't flinch. "It's not charity. It's community. And honestly, I need help too." She shifted her weight, and I noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the slight tremble in her hands that spoke of exhaustion. "I have twin boys. They're 10. Their father left 3 years ago, and I'm working double shifts to keep us afloat. I'm thinking we could help each other out. Childcare swaps, meal sharing, that kind of thing." Something in her direct gaze broke through my walls. There was no pity there, just recognition, one drowning person spotting another in the vast ocean of struggle. "I have to get Emma ready for school," I said, softer now. "Of course." Nora handed me a piece of paper with her phone number. "Think about it. We're having a meeting this Saturday in the community room. Just parents helping parents." As she turned to leave, Emma appeared behind me, her hair a wild tangle, still in her faded princess pajamas that were now too small. "Who's that, Daddy?" she asked, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Nora smiled at her, a genuine smile that reached her tired eyes. "I'm Nora. I have boys who are looking for friends to play with. Maybe you'd like to meet them sometime? Emma's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. Can I, Daddy? Please. And that's how it began. With 3 knocks and a simple offer that didn't feel like charity because it came with the understanding that I had something to give in return. I didn't go to the meeting that Saturday. Pride is a stubborn companion, and mine had been my only friend for too long. But the following Tuesday, when I was called into work for an emergency repair job and my regular babysitter cancelled, I found myself staring at Nora's number. Emma was excited at the prospect of meeting the twins, and I was desperate. The job would pay enough to cover the electric bill that was now 2 weeks overdue. With shaking hands, I made the call. Nora answered on the second ring. James, she said, as if she'd been expecting my call. What do you need? The simple question, not, what's wrong, or, why are you calling? But, what do you need, broke something open inside me. I explained my situation, words tumbling out too fast, too revealing. Bring her down, Nora said without hesitation. The boys will be thrilled to have company, and I just made spaghetti. There's plenty. When I dropped Emma off, the twins, Liam and Noah, immediately pulled her into their game of elaborate Lego construction. They barely looked up as Nora handed me a container of spaghetti for later, and shooed me out the door with assurances that Emma would be fine. I finished the repair job in record time, the weight of worry temporarily lifted from my shoulders. When I returned to Nora's apartment, I found Emma laughing, actually laughing, as she and the twins built a fortress of pillows and blankets in the living room. She's wonderful, Nora said quietly, standing beside me in the doorway. Smart, too. She's been helping the boys with their math homework. Pride of a different sort swelled in my chest. She gets that from her mother, I said, the words coming easier than they had in months. Nora didn't press for details, didn't offer empty condolences. She just nodded and handed me a cup of coffee, real coffee, not the instant stuff I'd been rationing. The community meeting is still happening on Saturday, she said. No pressure, but the offer stands. That Saturday, Emma and I went to the community room. There were 6 other families there, all single parents with children ranging from toddlers to teenagers. Nora had organized it simply. Everyone introduced themselves and mentioned one thing they needed help with and one thing they could offer. When my turn came, I hesitated, then said, I'm James. This is Emma. I need help with after-school care sometimes. I can offer home repairs and maintenance. The relief of admitting I needed help was overwhelming. By the end of the meeting, I had 3 requests for repairs and a rotating schedule of after-school care for Emma with 3 other families. Over the next few weeks, a subtle shift occurred in our lives. Emma started having playdates. I began fixing things in other apartments, leaky faucets, stuck windows, wobbly furniture. In exchange, Emma had safe places to go after school, and occasionally, containers of homemade food appeared at our door. Nora was the quiet center of this growing community. She worked night shifts at the hospital 3 times a week, and on those nights, Emma and I would have the twins over for dinner. It wasn't fancy, often just pasta or sandwiches, but the boys never complained. They brought their homework and their endless energy, filling our small apartment with noise and life. One evening, after the children had fallen asleep, all 3 piled together on Emma's bed like puppies after an exhausting game of charades. Nora and I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd been contemplating my failures just weeks before. Why did you start this? I asked her, genuinely curious. The community program. Nora was quiet for a moment, turning her mug of tea between her hands. After David left, I was so angry. At him, at myself, at the world. I thought I had to do everything alone to prove I could. That asking for help meant I was failing. I nodded, recognizing my own thoughts in her words. Then last winter, my car wouldn't start. It was snowing, the boys were sick, and I had to get to work. I sat in that car crying until Mrs. Patel from 4A knocked on my window. She'd seen me from her apartment. She watched the boys that night, and the next day her husband helped me fix the car. Nora looked up at me. It made me realize we're all struggling with something, and we all have something to give. Even when we think we don't. In that moment, looking at Nora's face in the soft light of my kitchen, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Maria died: connection. Not just the physical attraction, though that was certainly there, but the profound relief of being seen and understood. Maria had cancer, I said suddenly, the words I'd held inside for so long finally finding release. It was quick. 4 months from diagnosis to, I couldn't finish the sentence. Nora reached across the table and took my hand. She didn't say, "I'm sorry," or offer platitudes. She just held on, her grip firm and warm, anchoring me as I spoke about Maria for the first time in months. About her laugh, her love for Emma, the way she faced her illness with a courage I couldn't comprehend. "Emma has her smile," Nora said when I finally fell silent. I noticed it the first day. That night changed something between us. We weren't just neighbors helping each other anymore. We were friends, confidants. Nora understood my grief in a way others couldn't. Not the same, but similar, the grief of plans destroyed, of having to rewrite your life story when the co-author disappears. Spring turned to summer. Our community of single parents grew stronger. We organized a childcare co-op for the summer break, taking turns watching groups of children so others could work. I found more consistent construction work and started building a reputation as a reliable handyman in the neighborhood. Emma flourished. The worried look that had become her default expression faded, replaced by the carefree joy of childhood. She and the twins were inseparable, their friendship a force of nature that swept through the apartment building, gathering other children in its wake. Nora and I fell into a comfortable routine. We shared meals, childcare responsibilities, and increasingly, the quiet moments after the children were asleep. Conversations that stretched late into the night, revealing our fears, hopes, and eventually, our growing feelings for each other. The first time I kissed Nora was on a sweltering July evening. The children were having a sleepover at another neighbor's apartment, giving us a rare night alone. We sat on the building's rooftop, a makeshift picnic spread between us, watching the city lights come alive as the sun set. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," I admitted, the words both terrifying and liberating. Nora's eyes met mine, steady and clear. "Neither did I." "It's scary." "Terrifying," I agreed, and then we both laughed, the tension breaking. When I leaned across the blanket to kiss her, it felt like coming home after a long, exhausting journey. Her lips were soft, her hands gentle as they framed my face. There was no urgency, no desperate passion, just the quiet recognition that something important was beginning. But life is rarely simple, especially for single parents trying to blend their lives. The first major challenge came in August when school preparations began. Emma would be starting 3rd grade, the twins 5th. The cost of school supplies, new clothes, and registration fees hit us all hard. Nora suggested combining our resources, not just for school supplies, but more permanently. We could look for a larger apartment, share rent and utilities, she proposed one night as we sat on my couch, budget spreadsheets spread around us. The practical side made sense, but the emotional implications were enormous. Moving in together meant acknowledging that this wasn't just about convenience or helping each other out. It was about building a new family. What if it doesn't work? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. What if we mess this up and hurt the kids in the process? Nora didn't have an immediate answer. We tabled the discussion, both needing time to consider what we were contemplating. The children, however, had no such reservations. When Emma overheard us discussing the possibility, she launched a full campaign, complete with handmade posters listing the benefits of all living together forever. We could have pancakes every morning, she argued, her logic impeccable to her 8-year-old mind. The twins were equally enthusiastic, already planning how they would arrange their shared bedroom and the elaborate Lego city they could build if they combined their collections. Their excitement was infectious, but it also increased the pressure. The stakes felt impossibly high. Then came the second major challenge. David, the twins' father, reappeared. He called Nora out of the blue on a Sunday morning, saying he was in town and wanted to see the boys. It had been over a year since his last visit, longer since he'd paid any child support. I watched the color drain from Nora's face as she took the call, saw the way her hand trembled as she hung up. "He wants to take them to lunch," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Just for a few hours." The twins had complicated feelings about their father. They were excited to see him but wary, their young hearts already familiar with the pain of disappointment. Nora struggled with whether to allow the visit, torn between protecting them and acknowledging their need to maintain some connection with their dad. In the end, she agreed to a supervised lunch at a restaurant near our building. I offered to come along for support, but Nora shook her head. "This is something I need to handle myself," she said, though the gratitude in her eyes for the offer was clear. The lunch was predictably difficult. David was charming, bearing expensive gifts and grand promises about staying in touch, visiting more often, maybe even taking the boys for part of the summer. The twins returned home excited and confused, their emotions a tangled mess that Nora patiently helped them navigate. What we didn't expect was David's reaction to learning about me, about us. He called Nora that night, his voice loud enough that I could hear it from across the room. "You're replacing me with some handyman?" he demanded. "What kind of example is that setting for my sons?" Nora's response was measured but firm. "You chose to leave, David. You don't get to dictate how I rebuild our lives." The call ended with threats, vague mentions of custody rights that had been dormant for years, implications that Nora's work schedule made her an unfit mother, suggestions that living with a new boyfriend created an unstable environment. It was all bluster, we told ourselves. David had never shown any interest in being a full-time parent. His child support payments were sporadic at best, his visits rare. But the threat hung over us, casting a shadow on our plans. Nora became hesitant about moving in together, worried that any change might give David ammunition if he decided to pursue his threats. I understood her caution, but it created a new tension between us. For the first time since we'd met, we were not completely aligned. The children sensed the shift. Emma asked me one night, as I tucked her into bed, "Are we still going to live with Nora and the boys?" "It's complicated, sweetheart," I said, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "Grown-ups always say that when they're scared," she replied with the devastating insight of children. She was right, of course. We were scared, of changing what was working, of legal battles we couldn't afford, of opening ourselves to new loss when we'd barely survived the last ones. The situation came to a head in late September. David had made good on one promise. He was calling the twins regularly and had taken them for another weekend visit. But Nora received a letter from a lawyer, formally requesting a custody evaluation, citing significant changes in the home environment. She showed up at my door that night after the twins were asleep, the letter clutched in her hand, tears streaming down her face. "I can't fight him in court," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't afford it, and my work schedule." I pulled her into my arms, feeling her body shake with sobs. "We'll figure it out," I promised, though I had no idea how. That night, as Nora slept fitfully beside me, I made calls to everyone I knew who might have legal knowledge. By morning, I had the name of a family law attorney who offered pro bono services to low-income families. The attorney, Diane Chen, met with us the